You're listening to Nurturing Parents, the official podcast of the Radically Inclusive Parenting Project. Here, we hold space for real conversations at the intersections of parenting, spirituality, and justice. With each episode, we bring together experts, everyday parents, and advocates to explore how we can raise the next generation with purpose, intention, and love. So whether you're tuning in from a quiet moment of rest or in the middle of the beautiful chaos of family life, take a deep breath and let's journey together. Hello, my name is Nettie, and I'm a co-director of the Radically Inclusive Parenting Project. Welcome to another episode of Nurturing Parents. I'm so glad to have Sharon Jacob here with me today. Sharon is an associate professor of New Testament and Postcolonial Studies, as well as associate dean for students at Claremont School of Theology. Her vocation is to empower individuals to become critical readers of sacred texts and dismantle harmful interpretations that have led to the isolation, suffering, and marginalization of many people and communities. Thank you, Sharon, for being here.
Thank you so much, Neddy. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for heading this important project because it's such important conversation right now.
Thank you. That means a lot. And I'm really glad that you're willing to share with us a little bit about your journey as a parent and highlighting what an interreligious home might look like for parents and caregivers today. And so if you could just share a little bit about what that has looked like for you and maybe highlight one particular challenge that you've experienced throughout your parenting journey.
That's such an important question. So I'll start a little bit before I became a parent and talk a little bit about my journey and who I am, my professional life, and then how my professional life flows into my personal life. Currently, I work at Claremont School of Theology. I am the Associate Professor of New Testament and Postcolonial Studies there. And I am also the Associate Dean for Students. And because of my theological education background and doing my work in New Testament, I do identify myself as a Christian. I was born as a Christian. I grew up in India. I lived in India for about 21 years. And then over here now it's about 25 years. So I've spent equal time in both places. And there was something about growing up in India that really allowed me to think very broadly on conversations of interreligious matters. My favorite story about growing up in India is that, at least when I grew up, the India that I know things are different now, but when I was growing up, I rarely used an alarm clock to get up in the morning because we lived next to a mosque. And so we heard the azan in the morning and we woke up on that and hearing that. And then we also heard like our Hindu neighbors say their prayers. And my mom, who's very Christian, didn't want to be left out, so she played hymns as well. So it was this beautiful divine chaos, the sacred sounds that I grew up listening. And being interreligious always meant celebration. It was less about differences, it was more about how do we be in community with one another. And so for me, I really, as a child growing up, looked forward to being in community with my friends who were not Christian, because that meant on their festival time, we got all the goodies, and our festival time, they got all the goodies. And so it was always this exchange of food and exchange of wishes that happened. I also went to a predominantly Christian school, but having gone to a Christian school, we ended up saying Christian prayers. So my husband, who also went to school with me in India, knows the Lord's Prayer really well. And then I went to a Hindu college, and so I learned the Hindu prayers really well. So it was not so much about this is my identity and this is your identity and I cannot say this. And it was more about this is the divine and we all worship the divine in our own ways. And so we learn from one another. And so that's how I grew up. When the time came for me to get married and find my partner, my husband Madhu is a practicing Hindu. We did have some problems, which really took both of us aback for getting married, because there were a lot of questions, not in the US, but particularly in India, about what does this mean if you are marrying somebody outside your faith. And that was something that I had never thought about, because I just thought, oh, this is another human being that I love and I want to share my life with. And yes, he happens to be with a different faith, but and I don't care. And I think he felt the same way. But there were a lot of questions and a lot of pressures, particularly back home, about what does this mean? What does it mean if you have children? In India, you sometimes they ask you to declare your religious identity on your forms, on your government forms, in your school forms. And so I'll never forget, I was asked this question a lot. When you have children, which religion will you choose? And my answer to that was always both, but the category both is not there on the form. So there was a lot of pressure from the outside about which religion will you choose. We never felt that pressure. The good thing was we got married, then we live here now in California, and it allowed me to open up and explore the ways I would introduce religion, interreligious learnings to my children. And from there, this was never even discussed. I don't think my husband and me ever sat down and said, how are we going to introduce our faith to our children? We wanted it to be more organic. We wanted it to represent who we were as people and how we had grown up in India, of interreligion being dialogue, community, and celebration. And that is how we have raised both my sons. My older one is 12, so I've been a parent for 12 years, to answer your question. And for me, it was very important that both my children grow up knowing not just Hinduism and Christianity, but also other religions as well. So they do know some stories around Islam, they do know some stories around Judaism, given my own background as a New Testament scholar. So I do talk to them about that. And so they do know other forms, there are other different kinds of religion. And they also know that there are people, because in our family, we also have people who are non religious. So that also is a choice. But for us, it was very important that when they grow up, they don't have to choose one or the other. They can be both, they can be neither, they can be something else, and that's okay.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that background and that context of how you grew up. And the word that sticks out most is celebration. When you think about a community that has different religions expressed and different kinds of faith traditions practiced, it's a celebration to share with one another, learn from one another, be neighborly to one another. And that's something that I think will really encourage a lot of our audience and our community, is to see maybe there are different religions practiced within our own home or even in our neighborhoods, to see it as an opportunity for celebration. And even with that intention to celebrate, you did mention there were some challenges that did come up. And I'm curious if, when it came to parenting, was there one particular challenge that you can remember, or maybe a particular moment you realized, wow, this is really important on how we teach our children and model to our children? What does respecting one another practically look like?
Yeah, because it's not been always a bed of roses. Being in an interreligious household is difficult in the sense that we are constantly navigating how we don't create a hierarchy of religions in our own household, but that it is more a fluid kind of an experience for both our children. One challenge in particular, I would say, was when before my kids were born, was on naming, because everybody in our family wanted to know, what name are we going to give our children? And because name is a very big part of our identity, the fact that my name is Sharon in the Indian context immediately suggests my religion, right? So there's a way in which your religious identity, because of your name, is labeled and categorized. So we always wanted to have our children have names that represent both religions. So they have, I wouldn't say a Hindu name, but they would have, because they're not religious names, but we chose non-religious names for both of them, but like a Indian and a Western name that we put together. Arth is my older one, and his middle name is Adrian. And Lehan is my younger one, and his middle name is Jacob. And that's what we did with both of them. It was intentional. We didn't want religion to be reflected. So we didn't pick a biblical name or a name from a Hindu text, but we wanted something that would represent our culture. And because religion in India is so much part of our culture, right? And so that was one of the challenges that we had. And another smaller challenge is teaching prayers to our children. My husband's not very good at this. So when it comes to religion matters, the load falls on me since I'm the religion professor. You know how that goes. So I'm the one who taught both my children the Gayatri Mantra. I'm the one who taught them that. I take them to a church, and when I do take them to a church, it is very important that the church I go to affirms their non-Christian identity as much as their Christian identity. That's very important for me. So I do my research before I go just attend a church, or I take my family there. And because my husband's never been brought up in a church, he thinks all churches are like that. So he's like, oh, this is what I said. No, not all churches are like that. It's because I really do my research and I read their mission statement. And there are certain things that are very important for me, especially around things like Black Lives Matter, things like LGBTQIA rights, women's rights, reproductive rights. It's very important for me for that. So taking my kids to those kinds of spaces also helps them feel empowered that they don't have to choose, that they can practice two or more religions, and that's okay.
Wow. This is so encouraging. It's so encouraging to just have a space to share publicly what this experience is like when there's more than one religion or more than one spiritual practice or culture represented within our own families, with our parenting partners, within our children. And so it's really great to hear your intention, your research, your openness, and how you are passing on prayers to your children. You are teaching them what prayers look like in both Hinduism and Christianity. And I can't help but ask, have your children been around their peers at school and their peers just are confused because they have more than one religious identity, or their names, an Indian name and a Western name? And what was that like as a mother to have that conversation with your child when they experience something like that?
Yeah, that's a good point as well, because my son, when he was in elementary school, my older one, when he was in elementary school, he was talking to his teacher, and it was Christmas time, and the teacher was talking about Christmas. And it's not a religious school, it's public school, right? And the teacher said, who celebrates Christmas or something like that? And my son raised his hand. And the teacher actually was like, no, why are you raising your hand? You need to put your hand down because you don't celebrate Christmas. And so my son was very confused. So he came home and he said, Ma, don't we celebrate Christmas? And I said, yeah, of course we do. And he was like, but my teacher said that I think you're mistaken. You don't celebrate Christmas. And so we, in our own bubble, and this is, I think, true for everybody, in our own bubble, we're fine. But when the world outside doesn't understand the complexities of our family life, that's always so challenging. There is stereotypes out there that because my son is Indian, that he is Hindu, without recognizing that India is a pretty diverse population and we have tons of religions, not just Hinduism and Christianity, but we have Islam, we have Sikhism, we have Zoroastrianism, we have Jainism, we have Buddhism, we have all kinds of religions as well. So the stereotype is always that because of my son being a Hindu, he doesn't celebrate Christmas. And so we had this conversation with him. I had this conversation. I said, go back and explain to your teacher that, you celebrate Christmas and it's not just toys. We do go to church. We do go to church. You do go to Sunday school, and you have another religion. You also go to the temple, the Hindu prayers, and you can be both. He did go back and he tried to explain it. I don't think she understood, but later, when me and the teacher met, she asked what I do, and I said, I'm a professor of New Testament. That caught her by surprise because they're not used to seeing a body like me being associated with Christianity. Or they expect a body like me to say, I'm converted to Christianity, I'm an adult convert. And I was never an adult convert. We've been Christians, we've been Methodists for 5 generations. Those are some of the challenges. And we see that challenge from both communities. It's not just Americans who stereotype us, it's also Indian communities who are here, who look at our children and hear that their mother's name is Sharon and immediately go, what does that mean? Are you Hindu or are you Christian? And these conversations will not be explicit, they'll be very implicit. And there's also this whole thing about, oh, if your mother is a Christian and your father is a Hindu, then probably it's a love marriage, which it is. So there's a way in which these filters, these stereotypes, these categories are being opened up to consider a different possibility and a different reality.
Yes, absolutely. And it's just so inspiring to hear you tell your children you can be both. And I think that's a phrase that stood out to me as you shared. And for us listeners to just remember that we can model that, encourage that with our children. You can be both. The world will try to fix you into one box,
Yes.
and we have creative gifts and creative opportunities through God and through the divine to be more than what any human could probably just try to understand within their rational mind. Thank you for just being one of the parents and leaders in our time today that's showing us this example. Like you mentioned, there are so many stereotypes and assumptions made. And for a lot of families that are experiencing what is not the norm or the status quo, we can learn from each other's stories and be encouraged to say, okay, I can continue to teach my children that we can be more than what society labels us as. And we can provide our children opportunities to use their voices. And so I feel from your story that you shared, you gave your son the opportunity to use his own voice to tell his teacher, actually, in my home and in my family, we are both Christian and Hindu. And sometimes our children might be shy, but at least you were inviting them to do that. And we can continue to invite our children to empower them to be themselves, who they truly are.
And my son does that now. So that was the first thing. And then, of course, through the years, he'll get like a kid who'll say, I know you don't celebrate Christmas. And he's like, no, actually, I do. And he can actually name characters in the Bible. And the other children are shocked how he's able to do that because they can't. They've grown up in a Christian household and cannot name. And he will say, and let me tell you all the Hindu gods as well. And so he's like, if this is going to be a battle, then let's go. But it's been very encouraging to see how, especially my older one, has really embraced both these elements that he has without feeling that he has to choose one over the other because he needs to fit in.
That really speaks to how you've parented him. That's encouraging, I think, for all of us who are listening to just be reminded that what our children hear consistently at home from their parents or caregivers, that is ultimately the inner voice in their head will reflect what they've heard the most from those who care for them. And it's such a long journey to see our children grow and evolve more confident to who they are. And so, again, this example you've offered us is really inspiring. I would love to hear a little bit about your thoughts on how the person of Jesus in the Bible inspire you when it comes to believing that we can be more than just one thing. I'm curious if there's any parts of the Jesus story or the person of Jesus that inspires you as you teach your children.
Yeah, so much. And particularly in the way I read the New Testament and the way I teach students to read the New Testament, I read it more as a commentary against injustice, against empire, against the social evils. You see many times that people who come to Jesus to seek healing or to seek some kind of help, you're not seeing Jesus saying, no, convert first and then I will help you. Become who I am, then I will help you. He'll say believe, he'll say have faith, things like that. But he doesn't specify what belief, what faith. He's not saying that. And growing up in the Indian context, it always bothered me that we have come to a place in religion where the only way to have dialogue or the only way for me to accept you is if I have you vocally agree with who I am and change who you are to be like me. That's how I see conversion. And that's a very superficial way of converting, I think. Because growing up in India, I've seen this all the time. I've seen people who are very ardent followers of the gospel and who will go and start talking about the gospel to people on the streets, in the buses. And it happens a lot, particularly to non Christians in the Indian context, where a Christian person, a believer, will come in and say, "Have you heard about Jesus?" And just randomly start talking to people because they think what they're doing is important. And as a Christian, as a person who's practicing the faith, it made me very uncomfortable watching that. It has happened so much to my husband as well. And people would be, at least when I was growing up, people were very patient. Non Christians were very patient and they would listen and they'd be like, okay. And people would be like, oh, can I lay my hands and I can pray with you? And they would allow people to pray. But it would always bother me because I don't think that's the gospel. I think the gospel is more about being compassionate. Tell me your story. Where are you hurting? Oh, I'm hurting in this way too. Is there a way can we find community with one another? That to me is the gospel. It's in Jesus empathizing with people that he's helping, recognizing that they're suffering. The hemorrhaging woman who touched Jesus's hem, he doesn't chastise her for it. He doesn't say, "Oh my God, why didn't you believe first and then you should have touched?" No, she thought by touching him, she would be cured, and she was cured. And then she goes away. She doesn't become a proselytizer. She goes and tells the story about how this man helped her. That's what the assumption is. So the assumption of being in an interreligious relationship or even being in an interreligious community is, it must always be community first versus let me see how I can make you believe like me. And to me, that's the baseline. And that was very important for me when I had children, that they know these different aspects of religion. And even if it is as simple as they may not have read the Quran, but they know what Eid is. They know that. They may not know a lot about Sikhism, but they know that there is a place called the Golden Temple in India. So you don't have to know a lot about other religions. That's the other thing I really struggle with in this country, is that interreligious conversations becomes more scholarly than experiential. My way of understanding interreligious is very experiential, less scholarly. It's more about, oh, during Eid, I get to eat really good biryani from my Muslim neighbors, right? And so during Christmas, my mom would make all the goodies. Usually it was cake or pudding or something like that we would send. And we've tried to do that here. We have a big Diwali party in November where we call all our friends and neighbors, and they get to experience Diwali in our house. Our kids love it because they get to be with all their friends. There's Indian food, there's music, and there's so many times people will come and say, we really want to wear Indian clothes, can we? But we're scared, we're appropriating. And I always say, when you're celebrating with someone, don't think about things like that. So if you want to wear Indian jewelry, you want to participate and see how we do worship, because we have the little worship space in our home where my husband does puja every morning. And my kids will go and they will light the lamp and they know how to do the puja. I don't, they do. And many times they teach me how to do it. And then they'll go to church and they will practice taking communion. They will go to Sunday school. They will go for story time. And so they know the rituals of church and they know the rituals of temple. Right now, my older one feels he likes church more because he feels it's very structured and organized because he's 12. My younger one loves the temple more because you just go in and you can run around and you can do what you want and you get like a fruit at the end and you run away. To them, it's just structured space versus free space. It's like that. But it's organic. There is no, don't worship this deity, none of that. I also think a lot of this is because Madhu and me made the decision to raise our children, and it was our decision. It was not my in-laws or the society dictating to us how we should raise our children. And that, I think, was very important.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. You've shared so many great examples of how we can be in community with neighbors and even family members who have different faith practices or
Yes.
traditions. And thank you for offering that example of if you want to celebrate with someone else who has a different culture, the heart of celebrating together, it validates the way you want to dress and express and eat and play. Like you're joining in a celebration, and that's a beautiful thing. And this is also great because earlier you were talking about Jesus in the Bible, and what sticks out to you is that Jesus was so compassionate.
Yes.
He
Yes.
empathized with especially those who were poor and suffering most. And the good news is that compassion is available to all, love is available to all, even what society would say are the least of these. And that speaks volumes to a lot of our community members who come from a Christian church in the United States, but looking for a Christian community that would honor and celebrate the radical love of Christ, the
Yeah.
love that
Yeah.
is inclusive to all people and all the different ways we express ourselves. And so thank you for lifting that up. Thank you for sharing part of your story. And to help us wrap up our conversation, I'm wondering if there is one piece of advice or wisdom you'd like to offer parents that might be coming up for you in this moment.
First of all, I would say thank you so much for just opening up the space and inviting me to have this conversation. It really, really means a lot, Nettie, because I've been wanting to talk about this for a very long time. You know this, because I do come from an interreligious context, but I also am raising children in a very interreligious household. And what sticks out to me is often when we talk about interreligious, we want to talk about it from a very puritanical way, but not talk about the messiness and the chaos of being in an interreligious, because it is chaotic, right? So, for example, we do have to make sacrifices. When we celebrate Hindu festivals or when we are performing Hindu rituals, we do not eat meat. So, there are dietary restrictions that we have to take into account. And it's really hard because my children eat everything. My husband doesn't, but my children do. And there are these chaotic moments where my kids will come and say, "But why are you not making chicken today?" And I'm like, "Well, it's dad's festival, so we're going to have vegetarian food. When it's Christmas or something, then we have non vegetarian." So it starts with things like food and diet restrictions, right? You have to make those changes. And because now it's so organic, now my kids don't even ask. Now they're like, "Oh, yeah, it's the Hindu New Year. So today dad's going to make this and we just love it. And oh, it's going to be Easter. And so mom's going to make this." It's that kind of thing. And of course, we all cook together and we eat together. During the Hindu festival, there are certain sweets that they will eat. So for them, it's like, yo, we get all these different ways of eating. But there is chaos in it. There are moments where we will go into spaces and we forget that we are not supposed to run too much in a church like the way you do in a Hindu temple. Those moments are there, but that is the chaos of being in an interreligious household. And that's not a negative. Like I began by saying, I grew up in this chaotic and divine and beautiful melody of tunes. And my hope is to continue to use that chaotic melody of rituals for my children. And in many ways, they also see commonalities between the two religions. And I have always seen that. Now they're seeing it, but they're discovering it themselves. So they see that when they go to a temple, they do get a little tirtha, which is the water, the sacred water that you drink, and they get a little nuts or fruit or something like that, this little offering that they get. My son now was comparing that to communion, and he's like, "Oh, when we go to church, they do bread and wine. Isn't that the same? And you go to the Ganges and people like dip themselves to purify themselves. Is that the same as back?" So he's seeing these connections and that's happening organically. And I'm so proud that he's seeing that because that's how I grew up. For me, I never grew up thinking, "Oh, this person's different than me." I always found ways like what is common with one another. And the first thing that is common with one another is we're both human and we both are seeking the same thing. We're seeking love and compassion and affirmation for other people. So if I have to leave your audience and the people that you're reaching out to with one thing, it would be, before you even see somebody is Christian or Hindu or gay or black or immigrant, they're human first. And all of us have a very human response to love and compassion. So just trying a little bit of compassion will take us a long way in this world.
That's beautiful, Sharon. Thank you so much. Thank you for, again, sharing your wisdom and part of your story with us. And I hope for all of those listening, if you were inspired, which I'm sure you will, that you would share this conversation with someone else and just continue to share this message of what it can look like to be in a home that has more than one of anything. And
Yes.
we can celebrate being more and different than what maybe the dominant culture is trying to have us be.
Yeah.
And so we appreciate you. And again, just thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Nurturing Parents, the official podcast of the Radically Inclusive Parenting Project. We hope today's conversation offered you a moment of connection, a spark of insight, or simply a reminder that you are not alone on your parenting journey. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone in your village. Together, we're building a more inclusive future, one conversation and one child at a time. For more information about the Radically Inclusive Parenting Project, visit us at inclusiveparents.org or follow us on social media at radically.inclusive.parents.